According to a new study, the death toll from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico is more than 70 times higher than officials claim. The study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Researchers spoke with thousands of storm victims and concluded that over 4,600 people died as a result of the storm. Officials put that number at just 64. But that official death toll did not take into account the impact of the extended loss of electricity and access to food, water, and health care after the storm. CBS News correspondent David Begnaud spent weeks in Puerto Rico reporting on Hurricane Maria and the aftermath, and he joins me now. David, the official estimated death toll was only 64. This study suggests that over 4,600 Americans were killed in relation to Hurricane Maria. Now, that would make it the deadliest storm in modern U.S. history. So why this discrepancy?
So the government's number of roughly 60 takes into account direct storm-related deaths. So a death which involved a tree falling on someone, maybe a mudslide where someone was killed as the earth pushed into their home and destroyed it. These numbers take into account not only directly related deaths, but indirectly. So someone who was on oxygen but lost electricity at home and didn't have it, and so their death can be attributed to the storm. A diabetic who couldn't go to the pharmacy because the pharmacy was closed. So it takes into account a number of chronic illnesses that were not factored into the death toll. Now, those are the words of the academics, both on the island of Puerto Rico and at Harvard, who were a part of this study. This study, by the way, was done very cheaply in terms of money spent. It was roughly $30,000. However, for several weeks, graduate students and researchers went to about 3,000 homes on the island, and they interviewed people. How many people live here? How long did you have electricity? What kind of illnesses do you have? And they used figures that are very commonly used across the world when it comes to determining the number of deaths after a natural disaster. And they came up with the range of anywhere between 800 and as high as 8,000. Now, that is an incredible swing. But they say that their estimates are more on the conservative side. And so roughly 4,600 is where they're at right now. Now, the government of Puerto Rico has asked George Washington University to do a study on behalf of the government. They thought that study was going to be released in May, but George Washington University has said it's taking much longer than they thought. So the Harvard researchers actually said to me today, look, here's our study. We presented it. We can't wait to see what George Washington University finds. But as one Harvard researcher told me, the bottom line is the number being given out by the government, in the opinion of the Harvard researchers, is grossly understated.
So, David, it's sometimes hard for us to wrap our heads around these big numbers, but I think what really puts it into perspective is learning that this storm then was more than twice as deadly as Katrina. As a reporter who's been covering this storm as in detail as you have been, were you surprised?
Here's what I was surprised by. I was surprised by early on how Hector Pesquera, the governor's director of public safety, sat down with me for an hour and answered every question I had regarding the deaths, but didn't really answer any one of them. He essentially responded to most questions by saying, you have no proof that our numbers are wrong. And he was grossly offended that anyone would suggest the government was hiding something. And I think what I took from the Harvard researchers, who I spoke with at great length on the phone today, I think what I took most from them was they said, listen, we're not suggesting that the government is lying. We're suggesting that the way the government went about determining what was a storm-related death was wrong. Shouldn't have been done that way. And they were narrowing it down to, okay, Jane Doe died because a tree fell on her. Right. Well, there were 30 other Jane Does that may have died in that same neighborhood, but they died because they had chronic illnesses which could not be treated in the days, weeks, and months after the storm. And so their death was also attributable to the storm. Because listen, you have to remember what happened on the island. It was like a blackout. So pharmacies weren't open for weeks and months. Hospitals couldn't even keep the lights on. I mean, they were medevacing mothers who were pregnant and other people off the island. You remember the government sent in that hospital ship to use as an emergency hospital that they docked in San Juan. I mean, it was the worst case catastrophic scenario. So it makes a lot of sense that these deaths are attributable to the storm, even though they didn't happen as the storm was making landfall. They happened days and weeks later.
David Begnaud, thank you so much for all your reporting on this important story and for checking in with us on your vacation. Thank you.
You bet. And by the way, we're actually on our way back to Puerto Rico right now. So we'll have more reports on CBSN and starting Wednesday morning on CBS This Morning.
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
You bet.